Welcome to the Josh Huisman Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, and I'm very excited to talk. We're going to spend an entire episode talking about why we start podcasts, why we're having these conversations, and I have a great guest here to really walk us through some good stuff. His name is Jim McCarthy, and he is the host of the Mostly Middle Tennessee Business Podcast.
Yeah.
Formerly known as the What's Your Problem podcast.
Yes, I switched.
He switched. He had a problem. He solved it.
I did.
And now
I wanted to make it more complicated and harder to say. But, you know.
I love it, man. You had me on a guest a few weeks ago. It was more than that now, actually. It was back in December.
Yeah.
And had a great time going to your studio down in Thompson Station.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Is that where we were? It's hard to remember. And had a great time with you. And now I'm excited to have you on here to talk about podcasting. And a lot of people are in the new year now. Of course, we're all in the new year.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are in their resolutions. Hey, I want to set some goals. I want to get some things going. And I was thinking maybe we could spend a little bit of time talking to ministry leaders. And because I like to encourage guys and girls, those who have a message to share, that podcasting is a great way to go. And I thought you'd be a great guy to be talking about that today.
I hope. I mean, I should have the experience by now. I've been kind of doing this since 1997 in some sort of form.
Yeah, so 1997, is that when you got started in radio?
I did.
How did that come about?
How did it come about? I was an electrician's apprentice at the time, and I got to the point in my life with a recurring thought that my brother had said, that you don't want to wake up every day wondering why you have to do what it is you're about to do again. And I was at that point. In the electrical field is a wonderful field, a wonderful trade, but at the time I just felt like I had something else to do. I had to get something out of my system. So I ended up going to broadcast school. Worked my way. I started working for the radio station I swore I'd never work for, my hometown radio station, which I never listened to. But they allowed me to cut my teeth and learn how to become a production director, learn how to become a manager, things of that nature. And it just kind of went from there. Mm-hmm. I had to get out of my system. I started in college when I was there briefly. I did the college radio thing. I knew that radio didn't pay all that well. So hey, I'm 18, 19 years old. I want to do something that pays. Going into a trade at the time, I was good at it, and it would have been a good future, but there's just something missing. Mm-hmm. And I recognized that early on and said, you know what, I'll sacrifice the money. I want to have fun. Let's have a good time, and we'll figure out the money as it comes along, which is what we did. I mean, it provided us a pretty decent life. It allowed us to keep my wife at home, raise the kids and things of that nature, and have us be mainly a single income family for a majority of my adult professional life. So.
Yeah. Well, and as it comes to most things, when you're talking about production, there's two sides of things, especially in radio. You're talking about when you're the guy with the microphone, mm-hmm. and then you're talking about production behind the scenes and all the work that goes into that. So did you learn primarily to become a voice on the mic, or did you enjoy the behind-the-scenes production side of things?
I started out, the broadcasting school enabled me to get some production chops with reel-to-reel. So I actually do know how to cut and splice reel-to-reel tape.
Nice.
And that's what got me in the door. So they started me out as a production intern, which I would come in, cut tags for local spots and national spots. If they had a local advertiser that, was advertising on the oldies or the AM stations, they weren't ready to put me on the big rocker FM quite yet. So I would actually voice and, run things on the fly, fire off, the discs with the music and everything, fire off the reel-to-reel. It was like a juggling act, mm-hmm. And I would do those things and then put it into the system and so on and so forth. One day I would stay behind, and after the production director would leave and go home because he had a family, I would stay behind and go in his studio and start figuring out all the stuff, stay after and really dive in. And I learned the first editor I learned was this behemoth about the size of this table called the Fostex Foundation 2000. And this thing was awesome. It was digital editing. You had a scrub wheel on it, all sorts of stuff. And I just learned that thing inside and out, became proficient with it. Eventually, a buddy of mine he's a 25-year plus friend of mine now, one of my best friends. I didn't know him all that well at the time. He was the son of the morning guy, so he was in the family business. Mm-hmm. And he was 17, 18 years old, already had his own air shift, and he was great. Here I was, 22, 23 years old, and I'm thinking to myself, my gosh, I'm so far behind the eight. This kid's already on the air, and he's awesome. And he comes popping in. He and I were the only souls in the building. And he goes, hey, you want to be on the air? And I said, well, yeah, eventually. He goes, no, now. So what happened was the program director, who was our boss, he had the afternoon shift. He had the call out, which prompted Matt, my friend, to hit fill in for him. And then somebody that needed to fill in for Matt's shift, which was the 6 to 10 shift, or 6 to midnight. They needed somebody to fill in. So the guy who typically filled in wasn't available. And it got to the point where, okay, who's in the building?
Yeah, there you go.
So I was in the building, and that was my first night on the air.
That's all. And you just happen to have that voice that just works so well.
Not then.
Not then?
Not then. I was a ham. I knew I was a ham, and I was able to, I understood. I had the confidence enough when I cracked the mic to know I was talking to one person, even though it was a 50,000 watt stick. There were, from people from Long Island, New York City, on up to Massachusetts listening on, it was a huge flame throwing signal. Mm-hmm. But I just knew that I was talking, you just have that one-to-one connection. And just right from the get-go, I was decent at the on-air piece, but it wasn't my thing. Mm-hmm. On a music radio format, it was just boring to me because we were front selling, back selling. That was, here is, wait for the latest from Led Zeppelin, stick around. Mm-hmm. That just wasn't me.
Yeah,
I found more fun in the production room. Cutting the client commercials, coming up with the copy, the imaging for the radio station, which is the stuff that you hear between the songs, working with the voice of the radio station. That was fun.
This is so interesting, Jim, because I got started in Christian radio back in 2003. Yeah. My wife and I moved to Bowling Green, Kentucky. There's a station that's still there called Christian Family Radio. Mm-hmm. I got hired as a part-time. In fact, what I was doing was underwriting for the station, trying to find advertising. You're not allowed to say advertising because basically it's a nonprofit, yeah, so
you beg for money.
You're just right. And we had all of our on-air DJs, and we had all those who were doing that work. But every once in a while, they'd be missing, and hey, we need someone to fill in on the air. Yeah, that was my first experience when that microphone goes on and the light goes red, and man, it's you and. There's no going back. You know? Yeah. And thankfully for me at the time, I was cutting my teeth on what you just talked about. You play a block of 3 or 4 songs. That was Here Comes, that whole thing. And what that eventually turned into for me, though, is we had the back production room. And in the Christian radio world, we would have pastors who would come in, and they would cut little 30-minute segments, maybe messages or whatever it may be, every once in a while. And there was a few times when I got to record them doing those episodes, and I would get to edit out a couple of their things and just the production side of stuff. But the conversations that I got to have with them before and after were far more interesting to me than the things that they were saying. Right. It was kind of like a little glimpse into this world of podcasting.
Yeah. Well, talk radio at that point.
Yeah. And, when you say that it was boring, and then you go, okay, now we got to actually let's get to the stuff that's going to go on air. But the things that I was finding really interesting was the stuff that wasn't making it live.
Right.
And so here we are
that was
today.
Human. Mm-hmm. Real conversations. I mean, that matters, and that's what all my podcasting moving forward it's a talk format. Mm-hmm. And I spent 5 years in talk radio in Las Vegas. That was a fun format to produce because It was new. It was interesting. It was different. Every day could be something, you might get a frantic caller that calls in. But a lot of it was conservative talk radio. The other station we had was what we called Hot Talk for Men. That was fun, man. We had a blast with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, this is a faith-based podcast, so we can't talk hot.
We can't talk hot talk
for men.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
We're not going to do that.
No.
I'm just kidding around. So how many years did you spend in radio, and then you made the transition into podcasting primarily?
So from radio, let's see. I mean, really, 96 is when I started. That was when I was I actually worked for. I did the broadcast school. Then that got me into a country station in Hartford. I did promotions with them. Very small exposure in that realm, but mainly 96 till about 2013. So about 17 years. Mm-hmm. And then I went into the car business, sold cars for a few years. I tell people all the time it was my college education. I learned so much in that business. It's stupid. Mm-hmm. And then, that ended, and I ended up just going off on my own and knowing that I did a lot of video production. Oddly enough, video production came out of radio as well. So I did a lot of video for Jack FM here in Nashville, a lot of video for Mix 92.9. Those are the two stations I worked for that brought us to Nashville in 2005. And we just did a ton of Jack was fun because it was all the radio rules that were told to you, throw them out and try stuff. And it was everything you wanted to do when you first got into radio that they told you couldn't do. So Jack FM was just a blast.
Okay.
As well as intimidating at the same time.
So give me an example. Why do you say, what was the difference between that and your early radio experience?
Well, early radio had rules of radio. I was on an AOR, which was the home of rock and roll, I-95 in Danbury, Connecticut, with 40-minute long sets of I-95 rock. We're going to kick off another set coming up here in just a bit. Stay tuned. That was it. It was the same thing over and over and over again. So you couldn't deviate from that. You couldn't have dead air. We would get a little bit eccentric with the writing of our imaging, but as far as a jock, you were just there to hold down the fort, pretty much. But with Jack, you could take all those things and throw it out the door. You could have, I use this example, I can't remember who I was telling about, but I called it the Wheel of Songs. So Jack FM, if you're familiar, is playing what we want. Even though here in Nashville, they're one of the best Jack FMs in the country. And I don't say that because I work there. They're legitimately one of the nation's best Jack FMs, always top 3 here in the ratings and the prime demographics that they're in. They were always, just trying and researching the music that would resonate with the demographic that I was in, even a little bit older. So you could go from a Van Halen to a Salt and Pepper to a Run DMC to a Tone Loc, and then, a 38 Special to, something like Backstreet Boys. It was all over the map as far as music goes.
Backstreet's back.
That's
all
right. Yeah. And when you did things like that and you basically admitted a truth to the listener that we don't take requests, because no radio station takes requests. It's pre-programmed. We just admitted it, That honesty, that candor seemed to resonate with the listener. And the Jack character, which is what we had to write for, because we didn't have any jocks, the Jack character had to have 6 to 8 pages of copy every month. And that had to be produced after you were done. But 6 to 8 pages of copy, that's funny. I felt like I was writing for a late night talk show. And that was fun. But it put you in a space where you really had to stretch and be humble. Because what you thought was funny, I would get in front of 2 or 3 other people in a meeting every week. And you'd be like, yeah, get a load of this one. They'd read it, and it was like crickets. And you go, oh, okay. It's funny in my head, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's the part of putting yourself out there and just, see what happens.
It's a learning experience, right?
Right. And so what I'd love to talk about with you is as we get into your time in radio and then specifically into podcasting, what I want to do is really help the listener to this podcast, because I do have pastors who listen to this, churchgoers, people who are really just engaging in the ministry space, artists and musicians, whatever it may be, who may be in some form of a public ministry and thinking, well, I already do what I do. whether it's preaching or whether it's music and worship, whatever. So I don't need to do a podcast or I don't need to do anything like that because I'm already doing this other avenue over here. Where I have found that this podcast and the things that we're doing right here in the studio, in addition to what our church does, has proven to be so beneficial to growing the ministry of the church here, what we're doing, and reaching a whole new audience that we weren't reaching with regular live streaming and the things of our services.
Right.
So I've kind of, in my mind, really wanted to start encouraging people for the benefits of a podcast and the benefits of reaching out. And I thought you would be a good person to speak to that, and that you are really, you transition from one space into the next, and you talk a lot about the importance and the benefits of podcasting.
I was reluctant to get into podcasting, though, because of the technological aspect of it. I didn't want to. I knew of it. We had done some podcasts with the radio stations here around 06, 07 when podcasting became a thing. Mm-hmm. But, it was such kind of a threat to radio that it was kind of meh. So I had my foray into podcasting started with podcast intros because I began going on an entrepreneurial journey, and I wanted to marinate my mind in good stuff. So that included listening to podcasts that were positive, that spoke into my life, that lifted you up. You shoved all the media and news out of your what you consumed every day, and you picked your podcasts, which is what I did. And I would come across these big time business influencer type podcasts with these massive personalities, and their production value was just awful. So I'm like, well, I know I can actually help them and maybe even make a relationship with them. So the first one I did was for Grant Cardone. I produced a podcast intro for him. Recorded myself. This is a technique I would use in my voiceover stuff. Whenever I wanted to spec a spot or reach out to a potential client, I would film myself reading the copy and then produce the ad audio-wise how I would normally produce it in a radio station, but with the actual video of me reading it. So it was kind of a cool concept, and sometimes it resonated, sometimes it didn't. Well, so on and so forth. I ended up doing the same thing for Grant. Blew him up on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, all the platforms, emailed it to him. He loved it. And that started, an acquaintance with him. We've gone on to have him on my podcast. I've been down to his studio in Miami with other podcasts that I produce. But to answer your question, that's one of the virtues. Who do you want to meet? Who do you want to help? Especially in the production space, which was my strength. And then when they came out with the technology, the Roadcaster changed everything. That changed everything. That got me into saying, okay, I can do this now and have one piece of equipment pretty much to bring out to a conference room or wherever I needed to bring it or set it up for myself. So I bought one, I figured it out, and I was like, oh my gosh, this thing's a game changer.
Yeah.
So because I would do podcasts remotely, but you would have to bring a recorder, you would have to bring a headphone amp, all the different wires. And by the time you set everything up, it looked horrible, a rat's nest. But I mean, as far as the virtues go, I call them pretty much the 10 virtues of podcasting. They make you a better speaker. They make you a better listener. And who do you want to meet? In your case, you do have this kind of a podcast, the Josh Huisman podcast, which actually can help you expand upon topics you've covered in your services.
Yeah.
So, okay, as I've unpacked this service, we've done Sunday service on Tuesday or Wednesday. Do I have a one-off that a thought popped into my head? Why don't I expand on that particular idea? You know what I mean? Almost like a recap. In a way, that's an idea for somebody in this space that they could use.
Yeah.
Not only that, how can I? Are you putting out your actual services as podcasts?
We're not.
Your sermons?
No, we should be, right?
Yeah.
We put them out on YouTube where we clip them and we put them out in that sense.
Get an audio version.
And get the audio version of it. Yeah, and you know what I find all the time that happens is just like anything else, when you prepare, whether it's a presentation or it's a message or anything like that, I'll call it, I have the director's cut. And then I have the actual what was presented and preached on the stage.
Right.
Well, there's always things that get chopped out and get cut out. And the podcast oftentimes gives me an opportunity to go, hey, here's something I didn't say.
Right.
And here's something that, I could add this little note here and there. And it's in a long form. This one is a long form podcast.
Yeah.
Interview
based,
and we can talk about it. And it's fascinating to me how in conversations, the things that are on my mind, they come up. And I go, that brings a message that I just did. And it really, I don't feel constrained by time or any of those things. And so that's a great point.
You could break down different concepts because they always happen. Man, I should have said this. Or what if I had left this in? Or even while you're putting your sermon together, this would be an offshoot. This would be an offshoot. This would be a good offshoot. And you can cover those 3 or 4 offshoots in a recap and break them down even further. I think that would be tremendously huge for you.
Oh, definitely.
Not only that, just, the sermon itself, making sure that's a podcast. Because not only, if people believe in what you're doing and they start getting behind you, who's to say that your tithing doesn't go up? Because, hey, if you like what we're doing, just please consider, tithing to what we're doing here. Help us support what we're doing.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you at the end of this episode, Jim, if you would just consider donating. No, I'm kidding.
I'm here, aren't I? No, I'm joking.
Hey, yes, you are. Another great point.
Totally joking.
Another great point that you made is, and it was one of the reasons I made this, is because I love meeting different people, different pastors and churches, and we're normally working at the same time when it comes to Sunday mornings and it comes to different times of the week. But I love the conversations that take place between ministry leaders, and there were so many moments when I would be talking with someone, I'm going, man, I wish we were recording this.
Yeah.
Not because anything I was saying was profound, but because of what they were saying. And I thought, man, if we actually just had a podcast and gave me an excuse to invite these people into this space, and we can just sit down and do this. I mean, think about it. You and I, here we are sitting here. I've been on your show. Now you're on mine. And what other chance would we have had to do this? It created this opportunity for us to have this conversation.
That was Mr. Nick Hyder that provided the intro.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we never would have met. But the commonality was the podcast. Exchanging guests, if you will.
Yeah, and it gives us this whole avenue to do this, and I think you can learn from each other. You can kind of gain from each other's experience and what you're doing, and my hope is that those listening or watching, who maybe have that little click in their spirit that are going, hey, I've been wanting to do something different in 2024. Maybe this would be that show that kind of gives them that nudge to head down that podcast path.
Well, you'd also mentioned before that, why would I contribute to the noise factor that's out there?
Yeah.
There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people doing podcasts, which I completely understand. A lot of people come to me, I know I want to do one, but why would I do it and what would I talk about?
Yeah.
Those are the 2 big questions that I always answer. I say, why would you want to do it? First and foremost is to have fun. This thing, at some point in most people's lives, I dare to say, they've wanted to be on the radio. Man, sounds like a fun job. I'd love to do that. Man, wouldn't it be great? But, you've had the gatekeepers that let people on. Now anybody can be on the radio. Whether you have an audience is the only factor. And, of course, if you do it over time long enough and you keep plugging at it and you get better and better and better and you listen to your episodes, that's a biggie. You're going to get better at it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The first time you got in front of a crowd to do a sermon, you'd probably cringe to listen to it now, okay? But at the same time, going into something like this, why would you do it? Because it's you. There's only one you, all right? Why would I go sell cars when there's thousands of other car salesmen?
Yeah.
Why would I get into real estate when there's, thousands of other real estate agents, especially in Middle Tennessee? Because it's you.
Yeah.
Your circle of friends might want to hear from you. Your family might want to hear from you. And it spreads from there depending on what you have. It's not somebody else. It's you.
Yeah.
There's only one of you. You're, dare I say, a snowflake. And, getting into the other aspect of it is what would you talk about? I tell this story a lot with an insurance salesman, a guy that I know. And he says, well, what, I talk about insurance? I said, well, if you want to bore everybody to tears, yeah. Unless you're appealing to other agents in the space, maybe you're, being a voice of authority, or you're bringing voices of authority on and you're the conduit, would you want to do that? He goes, no. I said, okay. What else would you like to do? What do you like talking about? He said, well, I really like high school basketball. I said, here locally? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not sure how big of an audience there is for high school I know football is big. Basketball, I'm not sure. I just don't know. What else do you like? He goes, bow hunting. And his eyes lit up. I said, dude, okay. Now I think we were onto something. Are you licensed in most of the country? He says, all 48 states down here. I said, oh, terrific. Are there products that you sell that have meaning to hunters all day long? I said, well, there's your connection. Make it the bow hunting show. And hey, you could support, if you like what we're doing, and you could support me by, giving us a shot at your insurance needs. Have you thought about this kind of an insurance thing that is actually covering you when you draw back how it works? There's always some sort of a connection. Gary Vaynerchuk, who's not somebody you want to probably bring on a podcast that's faith-based, but he is, he likes to drop colorful language. I listened to him this morning. He says, look, if your thing is snow globes, go start talking about snow globes. And if you love it, just have fun with it. And that's the thing with the podcast. Well, I want to monetize it. Well, good luck. You can always ask. On episode 1, I want $100 a spot. Okay, you can always ask. Good luck.
Yeah.
But do it for fun.
Well, and so let's ask that question then. Why should a pastor have a podcast? I mean, if you just throw that out there and say, hey, a pastor is preaching on Sunday morning, they're delivering the word, they're sharing what's in Scripture, what it may be, why would I need any other forum than that? What would you say in a podcast space? How would that be beneficial?
Would you say that a pastor is a majority of the reason why people come to a church?
I would think so.
How much of a reason? About 60, 70%?
Okay, so yeah.
Okay.
Because just from that perspective, because you'd say a pastor is called to preach the word of God, to direct people to Jesus Christ, and that's true. But let's say in our area, we're talking about mostly Middle Tennessee right here, right? Where we could throw a baseball and hit 5 churches on accident.
Right.
Okay. So to answer your question, yeah, probably that figurehead, that person that's the pastor is probably
the charisma of the pastor and his personality and how likable he is and how he's able to deliver the message. All that matters. So why wouldn't you have other avenues to get your personality out? A podcast, at least starting from ground zero, making the sermon a podcast and getting it out there every weekend. That's built-in content right there.
Yeah.
Especially if you're videoing it, especially if because you're public speaking, it's like a radio personality. I never understood radio personalities that overcomplicate podcasting. Guys, you're already doing it every day. You've already got a leg up over the competition. You, by virtue of what you do for a living, have a leg up over your competition because every weekend you're creating content, content that has meaning, that can move people, that it can get out there. You can cut it up and put it on Instagram, all the shorts and things of that nature, and then having, like we discussed, breakdowns of the sermon. Okay, you want to hear more about it? Let's go into this topic much deeper. And even during the sermons, hey, for time's sake, I'm not really going to cover it here, but listen to my podcast. I'm going to really do a deep dive on this topic. But moving on, you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
You could totally front radio term, front sell or promote your podcast in your sermon. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. What brings to mind, so years ago, we would you'd have people who would visit the church and they would come on in and they would say things like, what drew me here was the church sign out front. I drive past this church all the time. I see the sign. I wanted to come check it out. So you hear that for a long time. And then when the really big shift to online went, people stopped saying that about the church sign. They started saying, well, I was watching online. And it kind of goes to your point. Online became the new front door for the church. The new front church sign was online. Right. So when people would show up before, in the front sign days, they'd go, who's the pastor of this church? Who's that? Like, now when they show up, I know who you are. I've been watching for months. Okay. And then now with the addition of the podcast, which is we're about 34 episodes in, now people show up and goes, I've been listening to the messages, listening to the podcast. But so like they've already checked off all these things to see, am I on board with this church? Are we on the same page before they ever get into the front door?
Right.
Which to me is a big benefit.
Totally.
And
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And so, all right, let's go back to your story. When you then got into that world, was the production side, the technology side, your biggest challenge, or was it something else?
It was the biggest challenge was the technology. I got into a podcast. I called it the JMVO Weekly Primer. And all I wanted to do was have conversations with my friends and see if I could pull content out of it. At the time, I wasn't so focused on the micro content, the short form. I just wanted to put out a podcast, see if I could do it, get a following. And it was virtual. I did it to promote my voiceover business. So I did it in the closet at home that I have a voiceover microphone and everything. And I would have people on my computer screen and take the Zoom and do that kind of thing. But mainly, I even did it on my phone with a pair of AirPods at first. I was really low tech for, a techie guy that came out of radio. What
year is that? What are you talking now?
That had to be 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you feel about that production-wise at the time? Did you feel like it was solid?
Yeah, it was okay. I mean, I made it solid. I knew enough to fix things in post and EQ and put compression on things to make it sound good. I didn't care how it looked. I didn't really have a space to do it. Until I had a business that had its own building and I outfitted I'm like, well, this would be kind of cool if I could do a podcast in my office and have it play a dual role. So my first podcast studio was my office, and it still is. But I had 2 cigar chairs that were against the walls. I had sound dampening, lights on stands and, professional microphones. But again, that's when the Rodecaster really became in vogue.
Yeah.
And it made it so much easier. Otherwise, I'd have, a rat's nest of wires on my desk.
Yeah. So it sounds to me, you're making so many things come to mind here. So many people want things to be absolutely perfect before they jump in and get things going. But it sounds to me your story, and I definitely know my story, is not that. Like it's basically you jump in and go, I want to do the best that I can, but the only way to learn this is that John Maxwell has a saying, jump and grow wings on the way down.
Yeah. You learn by doing.
You learn by doing and getting involved.
Your reps in.
And you're not going to be the best at it when you get started.
Let me tell you something. There are guys, Joe Rogan, his performance is meh. But he's got one of the most popular podcast in the world. He just kept at it. But he had momentum going into it. He knew how to talk to an audience. He's got the charisma. He's got the gift of gab, all that stuff that came into it. But I mean, when he started in comedy and he first took stage the first time, again, everybody's got a first time. If you have analysis paralysis, perfection's not profitable ever. Okay. If anything, I actually did a video series. It was a product that I would shoot people against a white screen and then mask it out so that it looked like they were on an infinity screen. And it was them. It was them talking about what they do, why they do it, based off of my interview stylings in radio. When I'd bring a client in, they'd get in front of the microphone and they would have their script in front of them. I would let them read the script 2 or 3 times, and I'd take the script away and say, okay, talk to me. Why do you get up in the morning? Why do you do what you do? What is it that you do? Why do your customers keep coming back? What do they say about you? What was your toughest day? What was your best day? All the different questions that would just come to my mind. And after a 20-minute interview, I'd be able to pull about, I don't know, maybe 6 to 10 commercials out of it. And it was them. It was truly them. Complete with mess-ups. I'm a fan of mess-ups.
Yeah.
So those videos that I would produce, initially the first 10, 15 minutes was them kind of getting comfortable and being in front of a camera with the lights and everything. And I would just feed on that nervousness. I'd say, you nervous? They go, I'm really uncomfortable. Well, you should be. Because it's really nerve-wracking, isn't it? And I would just say things just to get them, laughing nervously, and all that stuff would make it in the beginning of the video. Yeah. Because I wanted to show the human side of them.
And those are the things that endear people to you,
right?
The transparency. Nobody wants the facade anymore.
No.
And
there's a such thing as being too shiny.
yes.
All right. If you go to an event, and all the guys, I mean, they're going to have, if you go to any sort of event that's, a con of some sort these days, the top talent are going to be polished. They're going to know their stuff inside and out because they've done it so much. They've got the reps in. But the ones that that's why I say don't judge a person on what they wear, or how big their muscles are, and all this other stuff. Your first impressions, I think, should be based on what comes out of your mouth. Mm-hmm. What do you have to say? Don't discount people just because they can't, they're feeding a family or they got other things. They put on the same shirt every day. That's my story.
Yeah.
I know I'm overweight and although, if you're overweight, people don't take it. I get all that. Mm-hmm. But when I open my mouth, I think people take me seriously because I have the experience.
You have the experience,
right.
And that becomes such an important thing. And this might blow people's minds. Let me ask you a question. How much time did you and I spend preparing to have this conversation right now?
2 minutes, man.
2 minutes. Yeah. You came into the church. I said, hey, here's a couple questions, Jim. I was thinking we could go this route. We came in here, sat down, introduced ourselves to people, flipped the mics on, and here we are, right? That comes from trusting your experience and knowing yourself to say, I've done this enough times. I've shown up enough times to know that, hey, when the light goes on, we're going to be able to have a conversation that's productive and helpful to people who are listening. And that's also going back to your point, knowing that the first few times we did it years and years ago, it was terrible.
Right.
And yet you had to show up again and be better.
Yep.
And be better and be better.
My first voiceover demo was awful. I don't ever want to listen to it ever again if I don't have to. Mm-hmm. Voiceover demos from 6 years ago were awful. Like, oh my gosh, I put that out. I was proud of it back then. Uh-huh. But that's life, man. I mean, if you're somebody that's thinking about doing a podcast and you've got analysis paralysis is what it's called. It prevents you from moving forward. Just do it. Action is better than idea.
Yeah.
And if you have an idea for something, I guarantee you somebody else does. And if the person that wins typically is the one who takes action. So take action on it. If you don't think you have something to talk about, give me a call. We can talk about it. Mm-hmm. We'll figure out something you can talk about.
Well, yeah, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to bring this back to pastors and ministry leaders, anyone who's listening to this. Let me ask you a question. Do you have something to talk about?
They do every week.
Every single week.
They're skilled orders.
Yes. And so the thing to me, the question is not whether you should, it's more why aren't you?
Right.
Why aren't you doing this right now? And some might say, well, I'm tired after I deliver the message, what it may be. But I've just told you how much time you and I have spent preparing to do this. This is us speaking out of the wisdom of experience that we have.
Right.
For me, in my role as the pastor of this church, it's speaking out of my heart, the things that I feel God has put on my heart to be helpful to people. I don't need to prepare a message for that. This is just an outpouring of that. And I bring you on here, Jim, because you have experience in saying, hey, here's the value in that. Here's the value of bringing your passion to a larger platform.
Yeah.
And
completely.
So, can I tell you a funny story?
Go right ahead.
Okay, so you talk about the first time. So the first time I ever got up and gave a message, I was in high school, and my youth group leader was doing a thing where he said, hey, we're next couple of weeks, we're going to have you as students prepare a message, and you're going to teach the youth group, the class, the message. So he goes to me, he goes, what do you want to teach about? Now, he didn't ask me, do I want to? He said, so what are you going to teach about?
Yeah.
and I was, the blood drains out of my face and whatever. So I picked in the book of Matthew, there's a series of teachings Jesus does on the Beatitudes, and I picked the Beatitudes, and I'm gonna preach on that to our youth group. And I got up, and I can't remember specifically what I said, but I can promise you this: it was probably the worst thing you've ever heard in your life. I mean, I was like breaking out in ums and sweats and oh my goodness, and pauses and stops, and I imagine anyone listening to me probably went, please don't ever do that again. But, and I look back at that and laugh. And then I look at my time now over 20 years in full-time ministry, and 10 of it being in youth groups, 10 of it in a senior pastor role. Even this past Sunday, we're recording this on a Monday, but yesterday's message, for example, I won't say which one, but I've had some emails going, hey, you messed up this. Are you sure about this? And are you sure about that? And some people, that would make them go, see, I'm never getting up again.
Right.
Because I'm just going to mess up. It's not going to be perfect. Here I am, 20 years. I'm not getting it perfect. But it doesn't stop me, because here's what I know I have. I got next week. I got next week I'll do better.
Right.
I'm gonna do my best and show up.
You have to understand you're going to have off days. Even I do. My mind works so far ahead that my mouth can't catch up. So I have to slow myself down, otherwise I stammer and I repeat words. It's something that my father did, and it's something I knew I picked up on when he was alive, and I was working with him side by side in the phone business. He was in his 50s, and it just got worse and worse and worse. So he couldn't communicate very well, not because of anything that was wrong with his head or anything. I don't know why, but it's something I always remember, and it's because you have to slow down, right? So anybody who starts a podcast, I'm a part of a lot of podcast Facebook pages, and they're always looking, how do I effectively edit out, ums, uhs, filler words, crutch phrases, breaths, which I never understood, because God forbid you should take a breath.
You breathe for a living.
We're humans, If you pick up, and that's why I tell people to listen back, air check, you know that term, being in radio, right? Air check your podcast. That's the other thing, is that if you're hesitant to do a podcast, you're going to be really hesitant to listen back.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to want to hear your voice. I don't like the sound of my voice. Then you probably shouldn't be doing a podcast, because you got to listen back to it to get better. Every episode. You should be listening to every episode.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for over 20 years. Guess what? I still listen to every episode. And I critique myself like I'm a program director. What could I, what am I saying? I say, a lot. Write it down, all your crutch phrases, all your filler words, keep it on a list in front of you. The one thing that drives me nuts, and this is amateur hour all day long, hey, folks. Oh, folks. You should never say folks, even when you're up in front of a stage. You know why? Because it's a one-on-one connection. That's what radio is. That's what a communicative audio platform is. It's one-to-one.
Yeah.
You're talking to you.
That's great. I was going to ask you that question. How do you approach that? Do you view it like you're just talking to me, or do you actually think of all the people out there who might be listening now? What do you think is the most productive way to approach that?
I've just always been able to keep that in mind. A lot of radio people would actually keep like a stuffed animal or character or something in front of them on the mic or maybe on the board, and they would talk to it. And that would do it. That was a tool for them. I never really needed that. I always knew it was I'm just talking to you. And as long as I could hear myself in the headphones, that's another thing I'm seeing these days. Now, you know what really grinds my gears? I'm going off on a tangent.
Get off my lawn.
Yeah. Are the people that refuse to wear headphones. There's an effect when you wear headphones. You got to wear them. And now I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it because I don't like the way my hair looks. So just do it. Because you connect better with the person you're talking to, even if they're across the room.
Yeah.
You want to connect with them.
You know what else I think it does is it makes you feel like you're listening to the podcast the way it's going to be when it's out there.
Exactly.
As opposed to just we're in this room and disconnected from the audience. We're with you all right now.
Yeah.
Having this conversation with you. And that's really good. So, oh man, you made me think about something, and now I've lost my train of thought. That's okay.
Brain poof.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because another question somebody might ask, well, if I'm going to start a podcast, I got to make sure I got the right name to start off. I got to make sure everything's in place and in order, because once I get it out there, I can't change anything.
I did.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Because your podcast was called the What's Your Problem podcast.
Yes.
And now it's the Mostly Middle Tennessee Business podcast. Okay, so how did that come about?
What's Your Problem was an idea and a concept of which that I was cajoled and made fun of when I got into radio. I've always been this kind of person that if I hear somebody talking or we get into a conversation and maybe they're having a challenge or problem, I just always knew I could see the outside of their bottle, the label, much more clearly because they're on the inside of it. Mm-hmm. Some might call it you can't see the picture if you're inside the frame, that kind of nuance. And I would always see different ways to tackle problems or challenges or ask questions. Some of the people I worked with in radio early on, my buddy Matt, I was on his podcast recently. He goes, "Man, you could make people squirm with the questions you would ask." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You just kept on going and just, when I didn't want to answer anything anymore, you just keep on asking questions." I'm like, but that's an interviewer. I want give me the good stuff, Mm-hmm. So when it came to that kind of thing, I would always say, you know what you should do? And that's everybody at the radio station where I worked would always say, "Oh, here comes," my name was Gilly at the time because that was my honor name. "Here comes Gilly, you know what you should do." And and I get it. I know, okay, that's my thing. So that's where What's Your Problem came from. Because I knew if I can get business owners into our building, show them another virtue of podcasting, introducing them to your business and what you do, and get them familiar with you. I could always say, okay, what problem are you having? What's the deal? What are you dealing with? It could be small, it could be big. And typically, if it dealt with anything, I would always have an idea. Sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes it would be my problem that we talked about. So that was the genesis of that podcast. Over time, and this is a radio thing, this is why I think Mix 92.9 and Jack FM are very successful, is because they are live and local. Locality, if you want to do a podcast, locality will win every time. So I just wanted to be local. I knew a business podcast in the sea of all the business podcasts out there. I'm not a Brad Lee. I'm not a Ed Milet or Gary Vaynerchuk or that kind of notoriety. But what I could do is talk about Middle Tennessee businesses and just focus on that. And there's power to that. But my name didn't say that. So when I see, somebody who is, all the entire state of California moving here, they're looking for podcasts to listen to, or maybe they're looking to explore moving here. I wanted Middle Tennessee to be in the name.
Yeah.
That's why I did it.
So how many episodes did you record under What's Your Problem before you made the change to mostly Middle Tennessee?
170, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you put in a lot of time.
Yep.
And so how hard was it to make that change?
Not hard. I don't get romantic about the past. If this makes sense, just do it.
But did you think, and this is me out of curiosity here, did you think, well, I've already built up this audience, I'm going to lose them?
Same audience, I just changed the name.
Okay. Mm-hmm. How do you do that?
You just do it. You go to Facebook, you come up with a logo, you make the big announcement. Hey, it's a different name, even though it's kind of a mouthful,
So do you continue on with the number of episodes that you've done? Now you're in the 170s, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but if it was, it's not the topic that has changed. We've always talked about Middle Tennessee businesses.
Yeah.
It's just, we're talking about them and we're saying it out loud now. Yeah. And that's pretty much the positioning of the podcast, mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what hasn't changed is it's Jim McCarthy.
Right.
He's the guy who's there, right? I'm asking you these questions because I think sometimes we get so locked in to something thinking, well, I can't. I'm already too far down the road or whatever it may be. But to me, I go back to if you keep showing up and you keep doing things, your name hasn't changed. You're the guy who's there.
Your name of the podcast is actually the best way to go about it. Mm-hmm. It's keeping the Josh Huisman podcast or, the fill in the blank show, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You might as well do that because, you never know what you're going to change it to down the road. Now, if you don't have a name to capitalize on, that might be a problem. Mm-hmm. I've known some clients of mine that started out with the nomenclature of the fill in the blank show, and then they changed it to something that a subject option that describes what the show is about versus what their name is.
Yeah.
The Ed Milet show can be the Ed Milet because he's well known. Mm-hmm. Tony Robbins is well known. They can get away with that all day long. For me, I'm like, hey, it's just mostly Middle Tennessee business podcast with Jim McCarthy.
Yeah. I like it. The MMTB.
MMTBP.com.
Is it MMTB.com?
I know. This is part of the issue. MMTBP. Or mostly Middle Tennessee Business Podcast.com if you want to write it out.
With Jim McCarthy.
And how many derivations can I come up with or, variations can I come up with for a URL? So, that's...
There you go.
Yeah. I ran it by like 5 people that I trust and they're like, yeah, that's a good idea. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I like the "What's Your Problem"
Yeah.
name for the podcast.
But if
whatever.
you're moving here from California and I want to grow my audience.
I would never move here from California because I'm not going out there in the first place.
But let's say hypothetically, all the people that are moving in, that's why I did it.
Yeah,
so I want to learn about Middle Tennessee, and I'm a business owner, and I'm longing for freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I like it, and I think it's a great example because too many. To go back to the whole fear thing, we let fear control us to stop us from starting and doing the things that we know we should be doing. And then, when we were starting this podcast, why is it my name? Because we had some thoughts going, well, we should call it the New Hope Community Church Podcast. And that was in my mind. And I thought, if we call it that, I think some people will say, well, that's not my church. So why would I listen to that podcast?
Right.
And I wanted us to have a reach and to reach people and say, if you just, listen to the Josh Huisman podcast, well, who's that? I don't know, but just give it a chance. And we'll bring in ministry leaders, we'll bring in musicians, artists, those who are serving the Lord, and we'll have these conversations. And let's try to remove as many obstacles as we can so that they will listen. And then down the road, hey, there may be other podcasts that come out of this. That we have different names for, but this name here, Josh Huisman Podcast, can be one that I can just return to, and I don't have to worry about changing it.
Because you could talk about anything on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been helpful. And, we built this studio here at the church, and it has been such a nice thing for the other pastors on staff here at the church. Austin, who you met when you came in here, has just started a podcast. I think he's calling it Built on the Rock with Austin Duncan, where he just does teachings and he puts it out there. So he's using it. We use the space to create reels and different things we post on Instagram and Facebook and all the different things. All stuff that people go, should the church be doing that?
Yes.
And
why not?
Why not is right, And so
Jesus said, go out.
Yeah.
Social media is a way for you to go out.
Yeah.
And it's less energy, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm. Well, you to go back to your point about having fun, it's actually quite a bit of fun to do this and really enjoy getting in this room, having these conversations and getting them out there. I get meeting pastors, meeting people like you. It's been a blast, And
as long as you keep that in mind, every client that I get in front of and I talk to about podcasting, Guy, it's going to be 2 to 3 to 4 year grind. And I'm going to set that expectation. You could put out 10 episodes and have it hit. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that can't happen, but you're in for a grind. So have fun with it.
Yeah. With that thought in mind, what do you think is the best approach to doing a pod? Is it like putting an episode out every week? Is it
put one out every day if you can?
That's a
grind.
That's a grind.
Yeah.
2 to 3 years of that.
Yeah. Some people, I just want to do it one a month. Okay, it's going to take you 10 years. Mm-hmm. A lot of people put a milestone on 100 episodes, and I say, congratulations, you've done 4 months of radio.
Well, aren't you the bearer of good news?
But that's the reality, a lot of people, well, I've got 100 episodes. Great, you've done 4 months of radio.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that puzzles me about radio people that are still in the business. They could be, you're already doing this.
Uh-huh.
Why not just do it on a different format? It can probably be more lucrative. People are paying to have you read their ads, Michael Del Giorno, and then now you're giving away your revenue.
Yeah.
To another corporate conglomerate that provides syndicated reach that you could just be getting on your own.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's interesting is we do one episode a week here. Mm-hmm. We post clips and we do different things. We have guests who come on. There's only been 1 or 2 shows where I didn't have a guest come on. Like I did the New Year's episode a few weeks ago where it was just me. And that was because it was New Year and I wanted just one-on-one. Let me just talk to the audience, and have that. But I've had people ask me from time to time, how much stress is the podcast? And the answer is this. Now that we've got everything set up, I always tell people, remove as many things that you have to set up, get it in place. Get your studio in place, even if you're using your phone or whatever your technological setup is. Know what that is, get it in place, and then once you have that, for me, 0 stress.
Right. Because you're the talent, so to speak, coming in here and just sitting down and going. For my podcast, I don't have a team yet to handle my podcast. I would love to just show up, record, okay, hand off, go produce it. But I still do all of that. That's why everything is stream of consciousness. Everything is, I'm not going to edit the crap out of my podcast. I've actually put another element of editing into my workflow because we're putting spots in, we're putting commercials in. That takes a little bit of extra work.
Yeah.
But, I'm so good at editing and producing my own stuff that it's an extra 2 to 3 minutes.
Do you hire yourself out to do that for other people?
Yes.
Your studio too?
I don't do editing in terms of, hey, I'm editing filler words and all that stuff. I'm going to coach you on how to be better at not doing those things. Okay. If you were going to get a podcast and you want to edit all those things, you've killed it already. It's going to die on the vine because you're going to spend 3 to 4 hours. If you don't have any editing experience, it's going to take you easily 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
You're going to burn out quick.
2019, I wanted to do a podcast. We called it the Ministry Process. And the whole idea was I'd love to have pastors come in. Let's talk about how you write messages and how you do the whole thing. And we had another room here in the church, and we would put chairs in the room. We'd move cameras into the room. We'd move the microphones into the room. And set
it up every time.
Set it up every time. You know how many episodes we did?
2.
We beat your expectations. We made 3 episodes. And I was like, that's a killer.
Yep.
Like, oh my gosh, we can't do that. And it died before it even got started.
My specialty is helping people set up their own spaces. And even in some cases, I bring it to them. So I have a podcast here in town that tomorrow, actually, we're doing a recording. Every 2 weeks, I go, they pay me to set everything up. And, it takes me about 10 or 15 minutes to set everything up because I've made it efficient. They just show up and go. That's all they care about.
Yeah.
And it's all I do for them.
Yeah.
And then produce it.
So if Pastor Joe Smith wants to do a podcast and reach out to you, how does he contact you and say, hey, can you help me with this?
It'syourshow.co.
It'syourshow.co.
Yes.
Okay. And when they go there, what will they see?
They'll see the webpage that explains it's not optimum at the moment, but it basically tells them how they can get a hold of me and all that stuff. And we can get a meeting on the books, so to speak, or at least a call, and I can start going through my, asking the questions. What is it that you want to do? Who's your audience? Would you have a place to do this? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Which is a great starting point. So I just want to encourage people to do that. Reach out to Jim. It'syourshow.co. It'syourshow.co. And you can also listen to him on the Mostly Middle Tennessee Business Podcast.
Yes.
Which is the mmtb.com.
TBP.com.
Oh
I know. It's 5 letters. MMTBP.com.
I'm going to get this.
I know. BP, think of like the gas station.
Well, and you can follow you. You're on Facebook. You're on Instagram. You're on all that stuff. And you can get the guests and the people and the clips that you post that are on there and follow what you're doing. And I highly encourage people to be doing that. So what are some last things you want to leave the people with before we wrap this up?
When you go into podcasting, and if you've ever wanted to be on the radio, just remember, when you're on the radio and you crack the mic, everything you say cannot come back. That's why you don't edit. Treat it that way, and you're gonna be off to the races.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Editing is interesting. We've had a couple episodes where people have called me after the fact and said, "Hey, I said this one thing. Should we take that out?" And I was like, "Well, we could." And we give you that right. But let me just tell you this. That was my favorite part of the episode.
Right, because they probably got really authentic and vulnerable.
Yeah. And
vulnerability is a fear. People don't like getting vulnerable. I champion it. I constantly talk about the stupid stuff I've done and still do.
Well, and sometimes I go, because I don't want people to think.
Right.
And it's like, well, they won't. I actually thought it was very endearing, and it was a special part of the episode. And we'll take it out if you want us to. But and you go back to when you said the ums and the stammering and I don't want to sound not smart.
I need to have the camera on this side because this is my good side. Oh, for crying out loud!
I don't have a good side.
No, but that's what I appreciate. Just go, do it. Fine, put the camera on the other side.
Yeah,
I've had that happen.
Yeah. Wait. So when do you post?
How's the lighting?
Spend another $1,000 on lights. We can set it up. Okay.
Well, that's what we spent. I spend that on makeup for the shine, the shine on my head.
I just grew my hair back apparently. So,
oh man,
going for that thinning look.
Hey, when do you put out new episodes?
Every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday.
So again, it's funny because you asked about frequency before. I have a client that actually upped his, and again, this goes to a recap. He puts out an episode every Monday and has a recap every Wednesday, and his numbers skyrocketed. So something to think about.
Say that again. Well, I can go back and listen.
Yeah.
He puts out the episode on Tuesday and the recap on Wednesday?
Monday he does his main episode, then on Wednesday he recaps.
Yeah. So that's interesting because I've thought about doing where we put out this episode on a Monday. Mm-hmm. That's when we release this podcast. And then on a Thursday coming out with some sort of like a follow-up, whether it was a follow-up to the message I did or a follow-up to the week's episode.
I totally think you should do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, because this is more of a tool for you and a vehicle for you to bring people in the building to get a feel for it, especially here in the community of maybe their church shopping. Again, you're in the same situation that I am. You've got so many people moving into the area. Mm-hmm. Why not raise the flag on your church? Because you do have competition. When you actually do that, you're getting your personality out there. You should definitely be doing podcasts for your sermons. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And brand it with the church, with Josh Huisman as your pastor, that kind of thing, because that cross-brands you. There is a personal branding thing and corporate branding that can go hand in hand nicely here, in my opinion.
Good.
And then, of course, you have the shorts and things that can be cut from your sermon. That could be put on Facebook, on the Google, on the. Did I say the Google?
You said the Google.
TikTok, Instagram, all that stuff.
That's right.
And you never know who's going to hear what you have to say and make a life-changing decision.
Should we put it on the internets, Jim?
They should put it on the internets, on MySpace, on Friendster.
Yeah.
And send it out by mail.
All right. Last. All right, we're covering it all, man. Mm-hmm. We're doing it here. All right, so last thing. A friend of ours, mutual friend, is Nick Hyder.
Yeah.
He calls you the Voice.
The Voice.
Did you ever have that nickname before, or did he?
He just gave it to me. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what? Give me something in your voice that would give you that nickname.
Do you have copy? I can only read copy. A lot of it comes from. I did his intro for him. All the intros that I've done over the years, the Nick Hyder show, the Josh Huisman podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many have you done intros to shows, you think?
Hundreds.
Man.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I
need to do more.
Nice to, if you need this man to lend his voice to your podcast or streaming, whatever.
That's right.
Jim McCarthy.
Get a whole podcast intro and outro for only $2.99.
There you go. I love it. Yeah. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for being on here.
No, you're welcome.
And thank you for
having me.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah.
And that was a good time going down in Thompson Station at the studio.
It was challenging. I think I was was I somewhat controversial on that, or
I don't know. Did you feel it was?
No, I was just being me.
We talked a lot about church.
Yeah.
We talked about some church hurt.
Church hurt.
We talked about some encounters you had with pastors that didn't go well.
Right.
And I don't know. I didn't feel beat up. If that's you.
That's good. That's good.
No, I felt it was helpful. Did you get any response from that?
I didn't.
Okay.
But I need to. That's the other thing is I'm actually got an email list for my podcast that's going to start putting out this year. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're not doing that, but
an email list.
An email list, email blast campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick has started doing that. So here's what I do, because I have my own website, joshhuisman.com, where I send out a weekly devotion that I send out to my email list, and then I include the episodes that I have each week that people can go and they can listen to as well. And so I'm just trying to grow that. Is
that writing or is it recorded?
The devotion is written, but then I include hey, check out this week's episode of the Josh Huisman podcast.
What if you did the devotion as a recorded product that you could put on an Alexa skill? Mm-hmm. And every morning people say, hey, Alexa, I want to hear Josh Huisman's devotion.
Well, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I need to get on it.
I know Vaynerchuk talked about Alexa skills years ago. It's probably something to look into.
Okay.
This is what I mean. I have ideas. You know what you should do.
We just solved my problem, and we're going to get that out there.
You just saw what people used to cajole me for in real life, in person.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Jim McCarthy was here on the episode, and hit him up. It'syourshow.com. It's your...
It'syourshow.co and
.co.
mmtbp.com.
Yes, go check him out. He has a new episode of his podcast coming out tomorrow because this comes out on Monday, which means you have a new one coming out tomorrow.
All queued up, ready to go.
Buddy, thank you so much.
Yeah, buddy.
Really appreciate you. Everybody, thank you for checking in on the Josh Huisman podcast. I want you, if you enjoy the show, share it with your friends. Click, follow, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Let people know about this show so that we can grow the audience and really do some good kingdom work, okay? Hope you're having a great week, and we will catch you next time.